What's up YouTube? Today I want to show you some of the more advanced features in the new Phase Plant 2.0 curve modulator. So I showed you why the curve is so cool, particularly for Cytron's basses, but that was just scratching the surface of how cool the curve modulator really is. Let's dive in and have a look. I think the major thing to wrap your head around between curves, envelopes, and LFOs in the new Phase Plant 2.0 update is that curves are supposed to be the new MSEG, complex modulation system, whereas the LFOs are now designed to be more like LFOs, traditional just low frequency oscillators. That being said, you can still do both with both. There's particular features in the new curve that make it a little bit better than pretty much any MSEG that I have found. Let's have a look at some of those features today. So again, this might be a little bit less musical and a little bit more noisy, but I kind of just want to outline how these things work, and then you can apply them to however you want in your sound design to kind of create your own music. So some of these examples might be just a little bit random and noisy. Anyway. So what I want to do is just add a curve modulator. So traditionally when you think curve, you think envelopes, you think curvy things, but that doesn't always have to be the case. We can potentially open this up and draw in, a sort of stepped modulation, like we would do on like a bandpass filter FM lead type of thing. What I actually want to do quickly is I just want to remove this analog and I want to put in a wavetable. There's some really nice stuff in the spectral. And if you set the semitones down quite low, let's say like 24, and then use a modulator to modulate the frames, you get a really nice kind of Cytron-y gated lead type of thing. So notice by default that it stops at the end of the passage of the shape that we've drawn in. It's also not tempo synced by default, so we can click on this little clock, click sync, and then we can choose whatever time base we want this to go to. So for example, let's count how many steps we've got here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we could potentially draw in one more to make it a 16-step sequence. And it actually helps a little bit to draw in beforehand, because then you see at the bottom here, it says 8/4. So you get the exact kind of amount of steps that you would need to punch in here to get a full bar. That just makes things a little bit easier to work out. Here we've got, sorry, I lied. This should be, I think, 2/4, so that it's 4/4 at the end of this bar over here. Now it's going to go at 140 BPM or whatever, the 145, which is what our project is set to. This is cool because we're not limited to, often when, for example, you put in an LFO, you draw the shape and then you change the time and then you have to jump between the two to kind of get a thing going. You have to, when you want to put more steps in, then you've got to change the grid of your LFO and do the whole thing again from scratch. This is really cool because once you've locked it in like this, all you need to do is just draw in more steps afterwards, and it just automatically just adds them on. It doesn't change the divisions of your steps and all sorts of stuff like that. So we could potentially make this an 8/4 sequence, so double in length, more variations, by just adding extra on the end here. And again, we don't have to, you see how it kind of shifts the whole thing. So we don't have to then go in and work out all that other nonsense. It's all done automatically, which I think this is such a small thing, but this is going to make all the difference for drawing in these like custom sequences. So now it should be the same tempo as it was before, but now it's just a longer sequence. Okay, so we're getting to the really exciting parts here. So again, like I said, notice how it only loops once and then stops. So in the new Phase Plant 2.0, all of the modulators which are time-based have a new loop system. So what that means is it allows you to either loop in one direction infinitely, it allows you to loop in one direction only while the key is being sustained, it allows you to ping-pong, so that's backwards, forwards, or reverse, which is forwards and then 1 times forwards and then infinitely in reverse. So what I want to do for this type of thing, we want it to be an infinite loop, right? And you'll see here we've got these loop markers that have just popped up. This is really cool because we can automate these loop markers. So this is mind-blowing because now we could potentially loop phrases by just changing this. You know, it doesn't snap in this window, but if we open up here, we can actually snap it to the actual points, this is absolutely ridiculous. So we can create like one type of sequence and then just use macros to scrub like that sequence to change the modulations or to extend the length of the sequence and that kind of thing. So yeah, let's just see how this sounds. Cool, so you see it's only looping those first 4 steps of modulation. So let's set a macro to modulate this, all right? And notice how, what we can do is we can actually right click here and we can set this to the exact parameter that we want. So we want it to be 100%. And notice how it automatically works out that we'll need to modulate this by 87.5 so that the full sweep of the macro extends to the end of the bar, and it works it all out automatically. I think these small little features in Faceplant 2 or Kilohertz 2.0, it's these tiny little features that you often don't notice that are going to make the whole workflow of the whole system just so much easier. How sick is that? So here's the real power move for this type of thing. So what we want to do is I just want to remove this automation and I want to set this all the way to the beginning. So now it's just going to loop that one thing, which we don't necessarily want this, but the trick here is to open up a remap, right? And then what we want to do is we want to set this to unipolar, and let's set this to 16 steps and 16 steps, and we're going to draw in a linear like a linear staircase of values. So essentially what we want to do here is we want it to snap only to steps. Does that make sense? So let me just see, what am I doing here? We want sideways 8. So we're creating a 16 by 16 linear staircase. And now let's duplicate this remap and let's have a macro assigned to the first one and a macro assigned to the second one. And then with the first one, we want to get it to modulate this 100%. So again, right click here at the extent value and say 100%. And then again with this one, with the first, it might help to actually move this so that we can adjust this one to 100% over here. I think that would be, yeah, okay, that works out. So now, when we adjust these macros, it's always going to step. So that's the start point. We've actually got it backwards, and that's the end point. You see how it always snaps to the grid because we've put in that grid-like remap, these values on the grid here, like remaps. So So there's also various new trigger modes, and you can access those by right-clicking on the little trigger button here. So what this button does is it resets the time. You see what happens there? And you can choose whenever this is triggered. So if you say always trigger from note on, it's going to reset that sequence every time the note is triggered. But for this type of thing, we might not necessarily want that. We might want to set it to never trigger from note. And then we get the same kind of pattern and same playability where we can cycle through these little loop points, but it never jumps back to the start point. So we kind of get this drifting loop motion, which is really, really cool. And if you click this little icon over here, this little padlock, if you cycle through these presets, it's going to keep everything intact. All your loop parameters and everything that you've set to create this type of patch, it'll keep that intact. And it'll just allow you to cycle through all of these kind of preset built-in shapes and stuff to create all sorts of crazy stuff. Such a cool system. So simple, yet so effective. It's all in the modulation. Awesome. That is about it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you've got any other questions about the new phase plant or Kilohertz 2.0 updates in general, also let me know in the comments and I will try my best to answer those in a future video. If you like what I do here on YouTube and you'd like to support me, please consider heading over to my Patreon and checking out what I do there. I've also got various other ways of supporting me. You can check out my store to buy presets and all sorts of stuff. Or just hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share my video with your production friends. Anyway, see you guys next time. Cheers.